Paul, Jackie and I are sitting here in the UK office of SAP in Feltham, near London, and we'd like to say a warm welcome to everybody. Paul is the Director of Solution Support at SAP UK and Ireland, and shortly he's going to be taking over some parts of Europe. So a warm welcome to you, Paul.
Hi, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone.
And Jackie Munro is a colleague of mine from Learning Partners, and myself, Mandy Gill. What I'd like to do is to explain the roles that we're going to take in the webinar today. Paul is going to share with us his feedback and insights on the journey that he's taken with his team from when I first met him in 2006, where you had a team of 7 people, I think,
correct,
I remember, to now where the team is about 49 people and shortly to become closer to 70.
Correct.
Jackie's role in Learning Partners is Jackie's being the author of all the practical tools that we've applied in various organisations in Learning Partners. She's very keen on helping people deal with their day-to-day busy lives and get improved performance for themselves and for people working with them. My role today is I've been looking at theories, research, best practice in order to make sure that we in Learning Partners keep ahead of all the latest thinking and then apply that to different organisational cultures. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, the agenda today, we're going to be looking at the topics of leadership and talent engagement, in particular in these 4 particular areas. The first subject is we're going to look at how you recognise the impact of your own personality and values as a leader and how this affects your ability to lead. We're then going to consider how you build a good performance relationship with your follower group, and to do that, how you understand the personality and values of the group you are leading, because this has a big impact on the style of leadership that you actually then employ. Under the topic of talent engagement, we're going to look at how you can use different leadership styles, different skills and behaviours in order to build engagement with your follower group. And then finally, how you can use a structure to clarify the roles and responsibilities in order to engage your follower group with the business or organisation. And you'll see through the slides in the webinar these little symbols. We use these symbols to try and make connections with the different topics that we're going to be discussing. Now, the way we're going to actually run the webinar, we're going to do it in a structured way. First of all, we're going to invite Jackie to describe the model, the tool or technique that we've applied. Then I'm going to say a bit about the approach or method we've used specifically in SAP with Paul's team. And then Paul is going to share his feedback on the way the approach succeeded and his insights and comments onto the benefits that he's observed with a particular team. Just before we start, though, what you may notice is that Jackie and I in our photographs look fairly similar. Our voices are also fairly similar, so I will be actually making it clear who's speaking at any given time. The reason for that is we are in fact identical twins, and although we've been working with quite a wide range of different organisations for 16 years within Learning Partners, we have actually known each other for a far greater time than that. Well, I'm not going to divulge for how many years that is. So, the tools and techniques that we're going to be discussing today are a model called logical levels, and you'll see the diagram on the screen there, which is a logical level model. We're going to look at using Myers-Briggs and how values impact on your ability to lead and how you can build engagement with your follower group. We're going to be using a model called a performance relationship, which is a model that we've designed within Learning Partners, that Jackie in fact designed, which helps you build talent engagement. We're going to be then considering different leadership styles using the idea of emotional intelligence and look at how you can use these different leadership styles to build engagement with your follower group. And lastly, we're going to look at the structure of what we call performance profile, which gives clarity to people so they understand what's expected of them in their individual role and how that links to the wider organisation and business. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is invite Jackie to explain the first of these models, the logical level model. Over to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Mandy. Hello, everybody. I want to explain the logical levels diagram, and we've used this diagram extensively in our programs and specifically in SAP. And the purpose of the model is to help people to understand individuals and how individuals can align their goals to their personal values in the role, and ultimately how their personal values then can be aligned with the organisational values. In the role of a leader, the diagrams or the model has been very useful because it helps the leader understand how to create motivation. And specifically as well, in looking through the model when it comes to methods and behaviours, it also helps leaders to understand how to recognise potential and develop skills by changing behaviours. The way the model works is that if you imagine, it describes a logical structure that is actually unique to everyone. So everybody has their own perspective, but this structure is common to every individual. So the content is different, but the structure is the same. And it explains how we make sense of the world, and it explains how we can understand ourselves and why, in some cases, a small behaviour can actually have quite a significant impact in the way we feel. So the way the model works is that at the bottom layer, the environment layer, which is when and where things happen, and the behaviours, which is what we do, this is the least significant logical level. And I say least significant because I think we can recognise that we are able to change our behaviour in different environments. For example, if anyone is at a football match or a sports event, they may quite happily shout at the referee or umpire if they're sort of bothered by something that happens. But when we're in a working environment in the office, we recognise that shouting when we're bothered by something is inappropriate. So we're able to make decisions about where behaviours are appropriate or not, and therefore we're also able to change our behaviour readily once we acknowledge the environment that we're in. The second, the methods and skills layer, however, is actually much more significant to us. So an example of a method or a skill could be influencing skills, building relationships, decision-making, planning. And what sometimes happens is that when we consider this layer, we pretty much always recognise that it's quite significant to us. So, for example, on a personal example, I was once given some feedback that I had an issue with my communication skills. And naturally, I was quite concerned about this. And when I actually discussed with the individual who gave me the feedback what it meant, what actually he said was, "Oh, well, Jackie, when you get excited, you talk too quickly." Now, you may recognise the difference between when you get excited, you talk too quickly, which is a behaviour and an environmental statement, as opposed to a statement about communication skills. And this is a common error that people make in the organisational world in giving feedback, in that they give feedback at the methods and skills level as opposed to the behaviour and environment level. And obviously, at the methods level, people intuitively know that there's something more significant in the feedback that they're given. The main level, though, that I want to talk about this afternoon is the values and beliefs. And values are particularly important to us. They act as filters through which we observe the world and through which we evaluate our experience and ourselves. So values drive our focus of attention. They value how we decide what is right and wrong for us and in others. They create our motivation. They cause us to prioritise certain situations and behaviours over others. And they are our decision-making criteria. But the key thing about values is that whilst we may have common values with others, for example, respect or teamwork or efficiency, how each of us actually understands those values and demonstrates those values and looks for behaviour in others as evidence of those values is unique and different. So respect, for example, can be demonstrated by telling somebody what you think directly, which in another person's way of looking at the world would be disrespectful. And it's this that I think is a very important learning point for leaders in organisations. In other words, not to be too generalised in the way they communicate with individuals, to understand what an individual's values actually and specifically mean for them. A good example of this, just as a final thing, is if I said to somebody that we were delivering a project which would be a goal, and we said that we wanted the project to be done efficiently, competently, and using our experience, which would be more values, then you could see the difference between an example where I would say that we want the project to be delivered with harmony, teamwork, and innovation. And just in emphasising different values, we would be driving and requiring, potentially, different behaviours from people. So that's, I think, the best way to explain the model, and perhaps you might be starting to see why it's such an important model to us in learning partners and to how we communicate with leaders on our programs. The first tool that we used in SAP was Myers-Briggs. Now, Myers-Briggs is the most widely used and easily accessible tool for understanding personality that there is. And essentially, the way we use it is we refer to it as indicating work style preferences, and these preferences are actually also influenced by our values. So you may be familiar with Myers-Briggs. It involves understanding preferences against 4 different dichotomies. The first one is interacting with others, extroversion or introversion, and this looks at the focus of attention and energy source. The second one is communication, how you take in information, either sensing or intuitive. Third one is decision-making, thinking or feeling. And the fourth one is planning and organising, judging and perceiving. What we've done in Learning Partners is to identify the values that are connected with each of these preferences. And we use these to help managers and leaders understand the different value structures for individuals. I'm going to hand over to Mandy now to talk about working in SAP.
Thank you, Jackie. What I'm going to do now is just describe the approach that we took working with Paul and his team. I first met Paul when he attended a leadership program that we designed and ran for SAP. As part of that program, Paul received some 360 feedback from his team and peers. And we followed up with some one-to-one coaching sessions, which were part of the leadership program, which helped embed the learning. And during those sessions and during the program, we used our research into Myers-Briggs and values to help Paul understand his own work style preference and values, which he then clarified the impact of this on his being in his role of a leader. And during those one-to-one coaching sessions, he defined a personal development outcome for himself as a leader and for his team. And he's continued to assess those throughout your career as a leader. So over to Paul now to explain how that affected him.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Before I start on me as a leader, maybe just some context around SAP and what our business does and what the business unit within SAP does that I head up. So for those who don't know, SAP makes business software, and within that I run an organization that is called Solution Support, and our main objective is to make sure that our customers are successful with our solutions that they build in order to gain business benefit from them. So it is a non-commercial part of the business. We're not driven by the numbers, we're driven by customer success and also SAP success within the customer. So I thought it's important to mention that because it aligns nicely with the values, my own personal values, which I think is critical in the process that we went through with learning partners, is how to align personal values to business values and business outcomes. So I am an INTP going back to Myers-Briggs. There's some behavioral aspects to that, which we'll go into a little bit later. But I would like to start off by sharing some of my own personal values and how I use the concept of my personal values to assess my own situation on a regular basis, but also make decisions going forward. So I won't go into each one in detail. They are personal. They mean something to me personally. The words might mean something to somebody else. They are my personal, what I call psychological contract. I have somewhere an employment contract with SAP. I think in 2005 when I was appointed is the last time I saw it or looked at it. It's not the reason why I walk through the front door in the morning. The fact is my psychological contract is the reason why I come to work with a smile on my face and leave the office whistling as I go home. So the model I use is I listed them, and there are many, so I took my top 8, and I analyze this on a regular basis, and I discuss this with my manager on a regular basis, and I say, my situation currently, how does it fulfill against my values, where 4 is the highest and 0 would probably be the lowest. And then we talk about what goes well, so where do I get satisfaction and fulfillment of my values and my job, but also, for example, in July 09, I rated the learning and the innovation capability of my role as a 1. As you can see, over the next year, we did some work in that area. The learning went up, but innovation stayed reasonably low. I also use it, my role is changing at the end of this year, to assess whether the new role that was offered to me is actually going to fulfill me in my career aspirations and my personal ambitions. You can see that the innovation capability was one of the decisions that I went up with. And I think this is a very important tool for an individual and as a leader, because you need to focus not only what you, by making changes and making decisions, what you get added to, but also what you might potentially lose in the process. So that's on the values. On the Myers-Briggs, as I say, INTP, it gave me insight in myself as a leader. It's a little bit like holding up a mirror of in front of yourself. It's not always nice to see what it is and what it means, but it is insightful, and it gives reasons, and it makes it okay sometimes to feel the way you feel, even though you might think initially that's the wrong way to feel. It explains that to yourself, so it gives you that self-knowledge in understanding your strengths, but also your blind spots as a leader. So as an INTP, for example, I am not great on the F side of things, so the feeling side of things. So this gave me the focus to develop my skills and trying to understand how other people think and feel, to show some empathy, to before reacting, put myself in their shoes, trying to understand their values, their personality types, and therefore interpret their behavior before I filter it through my own values and interpret it in my own way. Very importantly, it gave me the insight that when people see things differently, that doesn't make them wrong. And it allowed me to find a deputy, her name is Victoria, by the way, that covers my blind spots. So she is a Myers-Briggs and ESFJ, which means basically 180 degrees different from what I am. And that really, as the pair of us, make a powerful force in driving the team forward and achieving the business results.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. What I'd like to do is just say hi to people in Italy and the USA, Saudi, from our audience, and for everyone else joining us in the UK, welcome. Moving on to our second tool, the performance relationship. Over to you, Jackie, to explain that.
Thank you. This is a tool that we sort of created in Learning Partners, and I coined the expression a few years ago, particularly to remind leaders and managers that it is people who deliver results, and that the relationship between the leaders and managers and people is really, really significant, because it creates the engagement through which an organisation achieves its results. A good performance relationship enables people to perform to the best of their ability, deliver results, and realise their potential. And we may, all of us, have seen examples of poor performance relationships, possibly even having been in one ourselves, when there was some mistrust or disconnect between our manager or the leader that we observe and employees, It certainly hinders good performance, it demotivates individuals, wastes money and opportunities, and most importantly, it causes people to leave organisations, demonstrated through exit interviews that we've come across. Just very briefly, though, the way that we describe the performance relationship is that we encourage managers to use this as a measure for their talent engagement. A good performance relationship is characterised by trust, a two-way dialogue that's regular, openness both in terms of good news and bad news, confidence because that enables managers and leaders to delegate, consideration, and particularly consideration for other people's values, as Paul has demonstrated so well today, action-centred because it delivers results, and no surprises. The way that we do this is by encouraging managers to think of questions that they should be answering for their people. For example, what's expected of me, how am I doing, how can I develop, etc.
Thank you, Jackie. So just briefly, the way we, the purpose of the activities we then took part in solution support was to develop excellent performance relationships for Paul and Victoria with the team. And the approach we took was to analyse the team members' Myers-Briggs profiles and work style preferences and use the research into Myers-Briggs and values to help them understand their individual values and work style preferences and also appreciate those of their colleagues. We then learned a common set of adapting skills and techniques, for example, delivering feedback and chunking and so on, and focused on their priority skills by using different learning events, for example, through a consulting skills program or for others through a team leader program. And during both of these programs, people identified improvements to their work styles, and we then ran a half-day workshop to enable people to teach people how to write their own development plans and to write their own development objectives. Just to answer a point, Victoria, as a deputy to Paul, was not recruited by her Myers-Briggs profile. That's unethical. It was a lucky chance that she was a Myers-Briggs ESFJ, just to make that clear. Now, the outcomes that were achieved by this approach was that we were able to agree a team personality. For example, it was people-oriented, it was supportive, it was open and flexible. So through programs such as buddy system, sharing knowledge at team meetings, and swapping and shadowing roles, we're able to actually embed the team personality and identify some common values amongst the team of customer focus, integrity, quality and commitment. So over to Paul now to comment and share his feedback on the success of that approach.
Yeah, so at the time we were a reasonably small team, which made it probably a little bit easier to apply this, but it did help us to, that we got the agreement and to embed the approach. And we had some workshops where we put the people together, and through that we developed a common language of our values and skills, and that saved a lot of time in the communication. It also allowed people to understand other team members, to understand what they were about, to understand that they have different views and were not necessarily wrong. But more importantly, it established a common purpose for us as a team. We knew what the big picture was about, we knew what we wanted to achieve, and we could focus on that common purpose. It made underlying disagreements on a personal level, delegated that to the level of noise rather than the objective, because we could go and focus through the noise onto the common goals and purpose to achieve for the business. And it also allowed people to understand that disagreements, or when you feel that your values have been stepped on, was more of a result of misunderstanding and misfiltering between the sender and the receiver, and therefore people became less easily offended, and it was less personal than it would otherwise have been.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah. So moving on now to the third tool that we're going to discuss, which is emotional intelligence. Over to you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you. Emotional intelligence, you may well have heard of. It's created, or the concept really, I think, was created or publicised particularly by Daniel Goleman. And we've used it quite widely in our programs because it enables us to explain in really, or perhaps a technical way, to people who perhaps are slightly more sceptical, that emotions really are significant. The idea is that emotions are actually an open loop system, and in fact we have mirror neurons in our brain that have fairly recently been discovered that explain why we're so open to the behaviour of other people. So fundamentally our emotions are open to other people's influence, and mood is catching, it's infectious. The good news is that a good mood, for example, feeling motivated or committed or engaged, is more infectious than a bad mood. But unfortunately, a bad mood lasts longer. The neurotransmitters that are created when we're in a bad state or a bad mood take longer to disperse in our body. So bad moods like frustration or anxiety or feeling demotivated hang about a bit longer. So what we're able to do with leaders is to help them understand how to create a good mood in other people through the way they communicate and behave, and particularly how to change a person's mood from a bad one to good one because of the way that they talk and behave towards them. So we've been able to use neuroscience evidence to convince the skeptical. We believe that the leader has the gift of communicable emotion, and a tool for using this is that our values affect our emotions. So just very briefly, the leadership styles that we encourage people to consider are explained on the next slide. There are some styles that are known as resonant. In other words, they create energy and motivation and a good mood in people. The first one is visionary, which connects the group to the big picture. So the effect is to move people towards shared goals and values. And it's appropriate to use this when change particularly requires a new vision or when a clear direction is needed. For example, now that Paul is actually taking over a bigger team, I'm sure he'll be using visionary style to engage the new team. The idea is to make the vision specific for people, though. So it's not actually held necessarily at the organisational level. It needs to be translated to a vision that people can connect to at their own specific level, for example, at project or business unit level, and that this vision is then reinforced. The second style is coaching, which is where you engage with the individual's goals and values. And this has the effect of connecting people or person with the organisational's goals. And it's appropriate to use it to help an employer and individual to improve their performance by building their long-term capability. This is where specific feedback is very, very helpful. And we're able to help managers and leaders to understand that giving feedback using a Myers-Briggs model is very, very useful, because if you're giving feedback to people on what they value in themselves, the feedback is much more credible for them, so it's much more motivating. The third style is democratic, which is where you're seeking input from the group, and that enables people to feel valued, to get their input, and it gets their commitment through participation. So it's appropriate to use it when we're trying to build buy-in or consensus, and when we actually do need the input from our employees. The key thing here, though, is to feed back the results of the decisions that are taken democratically and how those decisions have been followed up. For example, if you have an opinion survey in an organisation, which essentially is an invitation for some sort of democratic input, it's absolutely critical that individuals receive feedback on what's happened as a result of their input. The final style that's resonant is affiliative, which is very essentially about valuing individuals. And this effect has the effect of creating harmony by connecting people to one another and building loyalty and relationships, as Paul has described. So it's appropriate to use this, particularly when perhaps a team is having a little bit of conflict, or the times are getting stressful, and or to strengthen communication. And I think the thing again here is to value someone for what they value in themselves. So the language of values is also absolutely essential in using this style. The second group of styles are called dissonant ones, and these are slightly more challenging, and if used too much can create stress in individuals and create anxiety, mistrust and conflict. Nevertheless, they do have a very important place in the toolkit of a leader. Pace setting is a dissonant style, but its effect on people is to help them to meet challenging and exciting goals, to feel stretched and motivated. And you would want to use this balanced by some of the resonant styles to give people the confidence to achieve them. The commanding, or sometimes called the directing style, the just do it style, can sometimes soothe fears by giving people a very clear direction, for example in an emergency. So it's appropriate to use it in a crisis or to kick-start or turn around a group that is experiencing problems. But if it's overused, then it just has the effect of disempowering people because it becomes overly parental and they don't feel they've got anything to contribute to the situation. So these are the styles that we encouraged SAP to use in assessing their leadership capability. So I'm going to hand over to Paul now.
Yeah, so this is one area where I'm still constantly working on. Because of my personality, my Briggs type, some of these styles come more naturally than others, and some of them are learned behaviors. So I use visionary, affiliative, pace-setting styles regularly. They come naturally. I consciously use the democratic style and the coaching style, so to get the buy-in of the team through the common purpose and goals. And what I needed to learn was to use sometimes also more of a commanding style. And this is strange. My natural reaction is that we hire professional, intelligent, mature people, and then to treat them like children would be almost patronizing. However, in some cases it provides comfort and confidence to the individuals, especially if they are less experienced in an area or go into a context or a situation where they don't feel confident themselves. Then being told what to do sometimes gives them the confidence to go and do it. And I'm constantly learning about recognizing which style to use in which situation, because individuals need different styles given the context in which they operate. And if we come back to my deputy, Victoria, through her personality type, she used the affiliative coaching and democratic styles regularly, and she is consciously learning the visionary and pace-setting styles in order to be the real force, and continue being the force that we've been so far. So, in summary, I think between the two of us, in the way we approach this, we covered for all situations, and collectively, but also one-to-one with the individuals in the team.
Thank you very much, Paul. What I'd like to do now is ask the audience a question, and you can respond with the question at the poll button on your screen. The question I'd like to ask you is, do the leaders in your organisation demonstrate a good range of leadership styles? So please, in your polling section on your screen, answer yes or no. What we've observed is that in organisations where there is a poor range of leadership styles demonstrated, you often see symptoms such as people losing a sense of their own self-worth, or feeling frustrated or not valued. Sometimes what happens here is that trust is damaged by, for example, overuse of a pace-setting style. And if the dissonant styles are used too much, what sometimes happens is that people feel disempowered. They start to escalate decisions, so they don't take ownership of their own decisions. They will escalate them to their manager or their boss. And sometimes they start blaming others, so that they don't take responsibility for their own actions. They'll blame others if problems occur. A company called Hayes has done some research into leadership styles, and they said that they have a big impact on the organizational climate in organizations, and therefore demonstrating a good range of leadership styles is really important in order to make sure that the organisational climate, which eventually leads to business success, is conducive to people feeling valued and developed. So, just like to look at the results of the poll. And 68% of people feel there is a good range of leadership styles in their organisation, and 32% say no. That's interesting. So let's move on to our fourth model now, which is the idea of a performance profile. That's something that Jackie designed to work with organisations. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you. The key purpose of the performance profile is to answer two questions. What's expected of me and where do I fit in? And it's fine having people who are engaged and valued and feel comfortable and satisfied, and they're getting a good sort of feeling about working in the organisation. It's also important, though, to make sure that these motivated people are doing the right things, and also that they're connected to the overall organisational business goals. So the performance profile identifies and communicates key components of, first of all, of a team's role, and then the individual's role and objectives. It creates clarity of ownership of people's responsibilities, and it has a very important function in preventing overlaps and gaps between what people are doing and what the team is doing overall, and indeed what it's doing in connection with other teams. And it links an individual's role to the bigger picture for the business, which also reinforces talent engagement. So we call it a performance profile. In some organisations, people would say this was a job description, but we think that job descriptions are perhaps a little bit sterile and static. So the idea of the performance profile is that it's incumbent upon both the individual and the leader and the manager to keep it up to date. And they do this through having regular one-to-ones to say anything different in terms of what's expected and where you see me fitting in. Essentially, the difference, though, is that we use a visual tool to communicate responsibilities as opposed to just a sort of text and a list. And the second part of the performance profile is that we use behavioural competencies to clarify skills requirements and standards. So, for example, the competency perhaps of influencing, we can show how it's different and has different levels of capability.
So what we did with working with the solution support team was to clarify the roles within the team, because the result was to deal with the problem. There was some confusion about the different types of roles, particularly as the team grew in size. So through a number of workshops, we identified role responsibilities, goals and tasks, and that we linked these to the bigger picture within SAP, in order also to raise awareness of solution support within SAP itself. So, for example, we took a corporate goal for SAP, which was superior customer value. Then, as a result of the workshop, the team defined the meaning of that for solution support as a department in the responsibility of proactive customer advice. The team then defined what this particular goal was in terms of their own role. So in some roles, for example, offering understanding and supporting customers' mission-critical business was the way that role linked to offering proactive customer advice in terms of the department, and then linking to the SAP goal of superior customer value. So each role was specified, it was linked directly with the department goals and with SAP goals, and then each role had a number of objectives, tasks and deliverables linked, so it was very clear what people were expected to do in different roles. So over to Paul.
Yes, so indeed, we went through this process and we went quite to a level of granularity where we went into the skills and the behaviours and the competencies that were associated with those tasks within the given context. And through this facilitation with learning partners, we used a tool to save time, basically, and reach agreement, and it helped to embed the approach because people were part of the process and didn't have to be explained afterwards. It also enabled myself and Victoria to use the visionary, affiliative and democratic leadership styles more openly because everybody knew the detail behind already. It gave the people in the teams a common language of values and skills, and that saves time as well, and to getting them onto the understanding of what good looks like. And also because it's clearer in our minds, it gives us better definition of the requirements for recruitment and promotion. But more importantly, I mean, those are business benefits. More importantly, for the individuals themselves, it gave people the self-confidence because they knew what was expected of me. Our role is a bit ambiguous. There's no clear definition of how many units to produce in order whether you're performing or not. It's about customer engagement. So they knew what was expected to achieve, what they were expected to achieve, and also how to behave. So the team members then, therefore, because they had the self-confidence, they came across at the customer side as more purposeful, more assertive. But they knew what they were talking about. They were comfortable in their own shoes. They were also able to say no when necessary, and at the same time still build and maintain the relationships on the trust. And trust means not only that I trust you to give good news, but trust means that I can also trust you to tell me the bad news. And trust means that I can tell you that I can predict how you will behave, etc. Furthermore, the team were able to benchmark themselves and basically evaluate their performance on how they were doing because the framework was clear. And last but not least, they knew how to grow from their current role into the next role, because behaviors, skills, competencies, everything was quite clearly defined, and it was not that difficult to see the delta between where I am now and where I want to go.
Thank you, Paul. Just a quick question now for the audience. I'd like to ask you, is a lack of clarity of roles and responsibilities creating problems in your organisation? And hand over to Jackie now to actually for some symptoms of where you've experienced problems.
Thank you. What we've identified with organisations where we've gone in to do some work to clarify roles and responsibilities is that the symptoms of a lack of clarity in this area is well, first of all, I would say that there are gaps in what some of the teams within an organisation are actually doing. So particularly where the organisation is complex or operates in a very matrix way, that there are actually gaps and overlaps, so that you find that people are doing work twice, or that key things are being left. Now, the result of all of this is that, or actually perhaps sometimes that the roles are just described too ambiguously and there isn't enough specificity. So the result of that is a fair amount of conflict and dissatisfaction and finger pointing and blaming from one team to another, and where you can identify actual wasted effort. People perhaps see it as someone changing their mind, but in actual fact it's because the overall role or responsibilities between teams and within teams is not clear.
Okay, well, we have the results now. Is a lack of clarity of roles and responsibilities creating problems in your organisation? 64% of the audience say yes, and 36% say no. So clearly this is an area that's quite important to focus on. What I'd like to do now is just to ask Paul to summarise the business benefits that Solution Support has gained from this integrated approach to leadership and talent engagement.
So we obviously we're a business, we're not a charity. We want some benefits from the investment we made, and we can summarise those in a few areas. One around talent. It allowed us to retain expensive skills. It also had a result that we had almost zero unplanned attrition. I think, if I'm correctly, only one person left the team.
Only one.
In the last 5 years. Around the planned attrition, it allowed us to give us the knowledge and insight in the individuals to move them if they felt that they did not fit the role. There's nothing as frustrating for an organization or an individual if they're in the wrong role. And we didn't use it as a tool to basically chuck them out the company. We use it to find something within the company that is better suited to them as individuals and to their values. And for the individuals that were in there, their effectiveness increased because we clearly aligned their personal values, goals and personality to their daily jobs. From a business point of view, staff levels grew, and even more importantly, business revenue grew by more than 1,000% over this period. This had a large role to play. We deliver people. We basically, we only have people to offer to our customers. It gave us, cost savings from a business through low attrition, and we're now growing and doing this in the wider European countries as well. From a customer point of view, we sell a customer experience. That is our business. And this approach allowed us to vastly improve the customer experience. The individuals in there also use these tools and techniques to understand their customers better and to understand what drives them and motivates them and what type of messaging and language they understand. And it created a branding around the product that's very well perceived. We've never had an extension, which is our flagship offering to our customers, cancel or not renew an engagement. From SAP point of view, the team is well regarded within SAP. I've got more people wanting to join the team than I will ever have the hope of having headcount for. And this leaves the team members with pride and satisfaction that they are something special, and that's good for morale and that's good for the mindset. So, in summary, for me and myself, and I'd like to also take this opportunity to answer one of the questions that came in via the chat. I call this the pursuit of happiness, and in the process of trying to be happy as an individual, in the end, you need to be satisfied with yourself. You need to be, understand what you do, feel happy and proud of what you've accomplished in life. And there's a process in it. One is to gain self-knowledge. For me as a leader, this came through the 360-degree feedback, the Myers-Briggs toolings, coaching sessions through learning partners, etc., etc. That gave me that self-knowledge to understand who I was and what I was. From that, it allowed me to gain self-control. Because if you know where your weak spots and your strengths are, you can control that. It allowed me to gain self-motivation, to understand where I wanted my career to go. How do I scale and find opportunities that fulfill my values, and gain self-confidence that I can trust in myself, that I know I will behave, that I can predict how I will feel, and that in the end leads to self-satisfaction. That was for myself. We did similar with the team. We're still going through that with the team. And this is the process that we went through, and with very good business results in the end.
Thank you very much, Paul. I've got a slide here which is a summary of the models, tools and techniques. But more importantly, what I'd like to do now is to hand over to James for the question and answer session. So open to the audience. Thank you, James.
Thanks very much there, Mandy, and also thank you, Jackie and Paul as well. Well, ladies and gents, just as Mandy said there, we are at the end now of our main presentation. So, there's many of you still with us. Thank you very much. And also, there's been a load of questions coming in, has been coming in via the Q&A panel. So I'm sure, Mandy, Jackie and Paul, you've seen many of those. But to start us off, we are going to have a look at some of the questions that you've actually left us in the registration. So the first one that we actually have here, it came in from Rachel, and that question is, what is your experience of international engagement? And that's directed to you, Mandy.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to say is we've worked in various continents, in Asia, in Europe, in America, and shortly to work in India. The international engagement, to me, engaging people is the same, whatever country, whatever language you speak. People are the same. People are driven by their values and motivated by their values. Their skills, for example, if you're good at planning and organising, you're good at planning and organising whatever language you speak. But the different cultural behaviours may vary from country to country. So using the logical levels model, we're quickly able to find out what it is that motivates individuals, and therefore what behaviours they might demonstrate, which might be affected by different cultural contexts. So we've done a lot of work working in teams, multicultural teams, to help people work effectively together within teams, particularly running large projects. And within SAP, we also engage with quite a wide variety of different people from different countries. So, but the principle is, people are the same. People are motivated by their values. They demonstrate this through specific behaviours, and understanding one another on the level of a personal level will actually help you adapt your behaviour, whatever culture or whatever country you're working in.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. Ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know, many of you are sort of sending your questions across. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm just going to mention it one final time, that we aren't going to have time to look at every single question that's sent across. But you can rest assured that if you do have a question, please type it in and get it over to us, because I know Mandy, Paul and Jackie are all going to be taking the questions back with them today, and we'll be able to get a response back to you offline via email at a later stage. So, now is your opportunity to get it across. Okay, well rattling on. The next question we have has came in from Heidi, and I believe this one is directed at Paul, at yourself. So, locally, we refer to potential rather than talent. Is there an essential infrastructure and/or principles which are required to make finding potential and succession planning a success?
Heidi, hi. I'll ask Jackie to just fill in more of the HR tools and processes and theory behind it. But let me share what we do in Solution Support UKI. And that's in essence, we believe that talent and potential will show itself. We have to create the forums for them to do this in. We use the buddy system that was referred to earlier. We use peer-to-peer reviews. We use the one-to-ones with the individuals. And what we look for is the initiative from people. So how willing are they when they understand the framework, when they understand roles, responsibilities, requirements, when they understand the delta between their current role and the next role, how much of the initiative do they take up, how much of the drive do they take up to move forward? And we take a combination of two things which we call performance and placement, and that's how well is a person performing in his current role, and based on that, how much is his or how valid is his placement within the organization, and should he go into accelerated growth or expanded growth, and what does it take to assist the individual in that process? So, Jackie, maybe a little bit more the official tools behind it?
Well, just generally, if which we often are required to do, or asked to do actually, is to create development centres to identify potential in people doing all sorts of roles in the health service and in the sort of commercial areas in the UK and Europe. Potential, I think, can be identified by things like creativity and big picture thinking, by the individual's courage and resilience and sort of tolerance for coping with stress, for their emotional intelligence skills, and I think for their self-awareness. So these are some of the key things that we look for in potential. I think from the infrastructure point of view, I would say that it's absolutely critical that there's good relationships between HR and the line, because what can happen is that if you go about a succession planning exercise in an organisation, people write things down about potential and roles and in the future, etc. And if this just sort of gets forgotten in HR, then it's completely wasted activity. So this sort of information needs to be integral to the business decision making in the organisation. So, for example, in the way that the organisation reorganises, promotes people, recruits people, looks at resource planning, the succession planning information needs to be just part of the daily decision making in those areas. Thank you.
Okay, Jackie, thank you very much, and Paul, thanks. Okay, next question we have in here, Jackie, is directed to you again, and this one comes in, well actually this one's came in from quite a few, came in quite a few times in the registration, and also quite a few times from different people today, but to take Sophia's wording of this question, how do you motivate someone stagnant to be actively engaged?
Okay, thank you. Well, this is something that we've trained a number of managers to do, really, and I think it goes back to the idea of a person's state and whether they are in a good state or a bad state. The number one thing, though, is that the individual, that the leader or manager doing this has to respect that the individual has their own values and has the right to their own values. And I think that what we encourage people to do is to, first of all, to create some sort of some rapport with the individual and empathise with them, and to acknowledge the fact that they are feeling in a particular way and to try and understand it. We then show managers how to elicit the values of an individual by asking what's important to them, and then well, how do they measure what's important to them? What do they need to see and hear and in order to feel that their values are being understood? Some of the issues that we come across are actually differences in personality, like extroverts and introverts, for example. And some people actually make a common mistake is to believe that someone with an introverted preference is not engaged because they don't appear to be demonstrating energy, when in actual fact the energy is internalized, and Paul will identify with this because he has an introverted preference.
Absolutely.
So it's by understanding what motivates somebody that you can actually start to put them in situations and give them feedback to help them understand themselves in the context of the organisation. So feedback's, again, a very, very critical thing. Not just what people are doing badly. We actually encourage managers to say, this is what you're doing well and this is what you could do differently. So I think those sort of tools build good relationships one-to-one. And then it's a matter of identifying, does the individual understand the roles and values of the organisation? Do they understand what's specifically required? Setting up a series of one-to-ones, fairly short ones, that are keeping the individual up to date. And then these sessions can build trust, just in the way that Paul has demonstrated, the way that he built trust within his own team.
Thank you. Over to you, James.
Okay, thank you there, Jackie. Well, we have another one in here. I'm trying to get through as many as possible because I know we are quickly running out of time. Yeah. Next one we have in here, Mandy, this one's for you, and it comes in from Nigel. How do we develop talented individuals without burning them out or creating envy in those who are capable but less talented?
Thank you, James. Well, I'd go back to the topic of values. Values are what motivate us. They give us energy. It's almost like going to the petrol station, filling your tank with a tank full of petrol without having to pay for it. So giving people feedback on things they do well that are linked to their personal values is a huge way of motivating and developing people to try and do more. It also minimises stress, because when we're doing things that don't take much conscious energy, because it's something we enjoy doing, we're far likely to be more resilient in stressful situations. If we are experiencing stress, one of the things that we do is using the information done by Naomi Quenk on Myers-Briggs preferences. We're able to actually help people to understand what are likely triggers for stress in them as individuals that are relevant to their Myers-Briggs preferences, and therefore what they can do to minimise the stress, particularly to suit their own work style preferences. And here, linking this to leadership, the affiliative style of leadership, where you value individuals for what they value themselves, is a really good way of helping people to minimise stress and maximise their energy. It also connects people within a team one to another and helps them understand that people are valued for doing different things. So you don't need to be envious of someone who's good at a particular skill if you feel that your own skilled areas are also valued, and then you can observe people who are good at different skills as a role model as to how you might develop that skill in yourself. So use talented individuals as role models.
Can I just add to that? This is Jackie speaking. I've had experience of high potential programs for probably more than 20 years in different organisations. And what I would say is that you have to treat everybody well. You have to treat everybody with respect. And things like good performance management programs across the wider organisation will mean that talented individuals don't stand out quite so much as having special treatment. I'd advise organisations not to make a song and dance about talent programs. I've seen organisations that have said, hooray, hooray, you're on the talent, sort of the young tiger list or whatever, and then absolutely nothing has happened. And so you've got people who are sort of all excited and then deflated, and then the people around them thinking, well, what's happened to me? So I think it's actually having robust performance management systems, having managers who are well trained and are actually given time to lead people as well, and sort of people management is respected as a professional skill is very important. And then specifically things like good feedback and support, giving talented individuals mentors, and finally allowing them to sort of rest at each level. So if you promote an individual, put them in a stressful situation, allow them time to gain some success there before you then move them on to the next sort of stretching project.
Thank you.